Thank you for inviting me to present a paper in this conference. My topic for this conference is Social Deprivation of Muslims in India, Deconstructing Sayyid Nursi through Sociological Lens. I'm from a social science background. That's why I would like to connect Sayyid Nursi with the social science perspective. And this paper is mainly in Indian context. India is a land of unity in diversity. This paper mainly divides into three aspects. One is the social condition of Muslims in India. Then what are the causes behind social deprivation of Muslims in India, and the need for adopting Nursian positive action, plummeting the deprivation prevailing, then integrating Nursian positive action and mainstream social science perspectives along with Amartya Sen's public action, the aforementioned Muslims' backwardness in Indian context, whose social and economic upliftment provided through the provision of protective discrimination under Indian Constitution. The provision is an effective means for the striving Muslims in order to secure justice and equal opportunity at institutional levels. Muslims constitute 14% of India's total population, and in terms of Muslim population, the country ranks third after Indonesia and Pakistan. The High-Level Committee of Social, Economic and Educational Status of Muslim Community by Sachar Committee reports, Muslims are at a double disadvantage with low levels of education combined with low-quality education. In some instances, the relative share of Muslims is lower than even the scheduled caste. This is the lowest rung of Hindu caste, who are victims of a long-standing social deprivation. Such relative deprivation calls for a significant policy shift in the recognition of the problem, in devising corrective measures as well as in the allocation of resources. The article mainly measures the quality of life by taking the pattern of education and workforce participation. The 55th NSSO, National Sample Survey Organization, reports that 20% of Muslims in rural areas live in absolute poverty. Monthly per capita consumption expenditure for the rural Muslim poor people is rupees 300 or less. As many as 48% of rural Muslims and 30% of urban Muslims are illiterate. It can be said that even though Muslims live in nuclear families, the size of family is considerably larger and their land ownership record is very nominal, and as they involved in non-agricultural activities. Then let us look into the socio-cultural dimensions of relative deprivations. What are the causes behind the prevailing social deprivation of Muslims in India? The first one is traditional apathy towards modern education. Muslims actually fail to keep up with the pace with which other communities advanced in the realm of education. According to Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, he is a social reformer in India, Muslims are backward in the field of education. They would not be able to review their full share in government administration without being fully equipped with modern education. Muslims start their education from madrasas, where they learn Islamic jurisprudence, theology, finishing without having formal education. Eventually, they pushed to be involved in the semi-skilled or unskilled labor sector. Majority of them are artisans, coolies, and petty traders, etc. as Muslims lag behind other communities in literacy. As a result, lower participation in public and private jobs, high dropout rate from the elementary to higher education levels are very common in this community. Okay. The total seclusion of women in social life and denying them opportunities for attaining good education are still in practice and socially sanctioned. Then participation of Muslims in economic activities. Economic deprivation is a factor that should not be overlooked when inquiring into the status of Muslims. The disparity in education that could be explained by the factors such as accessibility to educational institutions, ignorance of the Muslim populace, apathy towards modern education, and purposive abstinence from education. Affirmative action through job reservation that has been in practice in India for several decades has not been able to rectify the inequality in representing in government jobs. Then participation in employment. The employment participation ratio among Muslims, as per the National Sample Survey Organization report, 2011-2012 shows that Muslim had the lowest workers' population ratio aged 15 among all caste or religious groups. The proportion of Muslim workers employed in the government and public sector is less than 1/4. 83% of them concentrated in trade, hotels, restaurants, storage and communication. In manufacturing sector, 80% of them in industries with low addition like canning of fish, bakery, beedi, pillows, carpet making, coir, garments, textiles, footwear, matches and wooden furniture, etc. Let us look into the absence of pragmatism in Indian Islam. The apathy towards modern education can be counted among the prime reasons for the socio-economic deprivation of Indian Muslims. It needs to be emphasized that the backwardness cannot be explained by religious compulsion or Islamic teachings, but by the lack of social awakening and political unconsciousness persisting within the community. Some of them still perceive modern education as threatening their belief system that contains several unique customary practices, and this perception is exceptionally valid in the case of female education at least. That is, though some of the parents prefer to give elementary education to their girls, but they are not ready to send them for higher education due to such preconceived notions. There are scholars who interpret the difference between textual Islam and lived Islam, suggesting that the latter share nearly no features of the many fundamental treatises of Islam. Relevance of Nursi'in perspective in Indian context. Nursi says that Muslims themselves are the reason behind their backwardness. He pointed out that the essential enemies of Muslim world are ignorance, poverty, and conflict, all of which be identified as contributing factors to the scientific and technological backwardness of the Muslim world. Education, industry, and unity were the major things as solutions. For Nursi, poverty is not a completely hopeless situation. The ability of man to become creative agent is not hampered hopelessly by his being in a poor condition, because deprived people can work positively for their future. The deprived people's moral sentiments and willpower is something better than that of the so-called rich or affluent people in the society. This actually gives hope to the disadvantaged people. He argues that no science or human progress can ensure moral strength in the face of ghastly pains and fears that arises from the people of misguidance and unbelief. The moral dilemma faced by Muslims in the modern world cannot be comprehended in proper context unless he revives his inner consciousness in accordance with the principles laid out in Risale-e-Nur. Nursi advocates that an individual's duty as a believer should in no way hamper his duty as a peaceful and productive citizen. While reading Nursian concept of nationalism, his stance for positive nationalism is noteworthy in Indian context. Negative nationalism is inauspicious and harmful. It is nourished by devouring others, persists through hostility to others, causes enmity and chaos, and is fully aware of the havoc it wreaks. The Nursian positive nationalism should be evoked and brought to the critical attention of scholars and laymen alike. Positive nationalism arises from man's inner need for social cohesion and his cause for mutual assistance and solidarity with other fellow members. Instead, negative nationalism thrives on discourses that give out the superiority of one's particular race, culture, or religion, race, etc. Above all, his classification of positive and negative nationalism is a very powerful insight into the realm of social science in general. And Nursi also views maintaining public order as positive, and we should not adopt any means of disturbing public order and security as one of our obligations to our state. Nursi really worked hard for communal harmony and advocated the people for resisting any kind of unrest for establishment of egalitarian society. He raised his voice against injustice in society instead of being passive. The noteworthy accomplishment in his work is that he never preached revolutionary activism against the odds in society. Nursi emphasized that public order and security were the means most conducive to producing the kind of environment in which social change might be obtained. He advocated avoiding any sort of action or behavior that would lead to social discord, feeling of partisanship, or discrimination, or situation likely to lead to a breakdown in public order and security. Positive action, Nursi defines as what is needed in order to maintain social harmony and achieve the ultimate aim, the creation of a harmonious and healthy society through the renewal of personal faith. He reminds us that every citizen has their duty to maintain public order, social calm, and stability. Then I found many of the social science theorist ideas is very similar to Nursian perspective. For example, Herbert Marcuse, Daniel Bell, then Amartya Sen is a famous economist, Nobel laureate. First of all, I would like to say about Herbert Marcuse. He is a founder of New Left movement. Some of the striking similarities in their thoughts should not be overlooked. Firstly, both of them condemn in very harsh terms the present manner of progress of civilization. They also condemn the so-called virtues upheld by the advanced industrial society that only cares for such mundane and materially defined universals such as rising of productivity and living standard of people, etc. In his conception of great society, Marcuse emphasized the inevitability of a human factor that might form the very basis of the existence of individuals who in their attitudes, goals, and needs are qualitatively different from those who are educated, trained, and rewarded today. In the Damascus sermon, Nursi put forward a very similar argument with that of Herbert Marcuse. It is closer means to the realization of the existence of qualitatively changed individuals. The inward turn that Risale Nur advocates, where the believer's fear in God become absolute, he will be more courageous to face the overpowering features of the modern world. The illustrious allegory that Nursi draws while observing a child standing in much proximity to the railway line through which the rail passes on which he and his friends were traveling is effective in illuminating this point further. The child says, "Hey, railway train, you are the prisoner of a system. Your bit and bridle are in the hands of the one who is driving you. It's beyond your power to attack me. You can't seize me and hold me under your despotism. Off with you. Get on your way. Carry on down the track at the command from your driver." The child represents the believer, and the train represents the power structures in our society that put the very human factor under threat. Risale Nur's principles will teach the believer to search for truth in the world with his very positive actions that delineate a clear boundary between his religion and world politics. For Nursi, the ignorance of the political is to be understood as a very factor that gives the individual believer the will to proceed with his positive actions. Here, Marcuse calls for abandoning the existing political structure in order to achieve a real political dimension deserve attention. I would like to skip some of the parts in social science perspective due to the time constraints. Then I would like to say the similarities between Sayyid Nursi and Amartya Sen. Amartya Sen's public action includes not only what is done for public by the state, but also what is done by the public for itself. It includes what people can do by demanding remedial action and through making government accountable. Nursian perspective on positive action, individual's ability to be a creative agent in reducing poverty and educational deprivation is quite applicable in Indian context. Both Nursi and Sen clearly reveals the close interrelationship between the intrinsic value of speech, knowledge dissemination, and facilitating of critical scrutiny as three key elements in all the democratic process. Sayyid Nursi was the lover of freedom. Nursi's statement on freedom reveals its intensity, that is, I can live without bread, but not without freedom. Both of them tries to argue that it is only through reasonable application of these three elements that the problems of the neglected and disadvantaged could be addressed. It is a matter of critical concern that Sen's formulation of development is not content with material accumulation or surge in gross national product or technological progress. Instead, he envisages development as human beings' freedoms to do what they have reason to value. For Nursi, the believer, through his absolute submission to the will of God, secures peace and security at the collective level, and here he does his obligation to the state not out of compulsion, but out of freedom that he could acquire through the continuous use of his reason. As the time is running out, I would like to conclude it as economic injustice, theories of conflict between religion and civilization, and global terror constitute serious threat to humanity. Bediüzzaman Said Nursi's life and works and his Risale-e-Nur constitute an important means of providing answers to these questions and problems. His work really a lesson for the Muslim population in India, such as how to live in a productive manner based on their belief and without making any kind of conflict with authorities and other fellow beings. Said Nursi shows us his life, how to make possible a peaceful life in a coexistence in a multicultural society like India. In this context, Said Nursi's contribution to the global peace and entire humanity is admirable and commendable. Thank you.